Good evening, everyone. Welcome again to another live streaming of Basic Transfer Pricing Philippines. And our topic tonight is how to choose the best transfer pricing method. And also, we will discuss a new case about Adecco AS versus the Supreme Court of Denmark. No? What we will tackle here sa case is the adequacy of transfer pricing documentation. Why? Because there is already a legislation that transfer pricing documentation is mandatory. No? Just like here in the Philippines, we already have our loan transfer pricing, and what is the mandatory transfer pricing documentation that we have now? That is BIR Form 1709 that should be attached to our annual income tax return. Okay. Shout out.
Wala pa akong shoutout na gano'n.
Ila.
May viewers po na 6 viewers.
Okay, so shout out po sa mga viewers natin, no? And we will start with our transfer pricing method, no? Because according to the OECD, we also have our guidance, no? In the OECD, yung latest natin is the 2017 OECD Transfer Pricing Guidelines. And when it comes to the profit split method, the latest is the 2018 Transfer Pricing Guidance on Profit Split. No? And our first na magkaroon tayo ng transfer pricing guidance in the Philippines is that of Revenue Regulations 2-2013, meron po tayo doon na 5 methods as patterned from the OECD, no? OECD Transfer Pricing Guidelines. But if you try to look at the RAMO 1-2019, meron pa silang tinatawag diyan na 6th method, no? The other methods, kung ano man yung pupwede. But the transfer pricing guidance ng OECD is we have 5 methods. And what are these methods, no? So we have the comparable uncontrolled price method, we have the resale price method, we have the cost plus method, the transactional net margin method, and the profit split method, no? So yung first three na methods, yan yung comparable uncontrolled price, resale price, and then the cost plus method. They are what we call as the traditional, no? Traditional transfer pricing method. Yun namang last two, the transactional net margin method, yun yung tinatawag natin na transactional, no? Profit method, no? Why is it na meron tayong transfer pricing methods na kailangan i-apply? Because I have read one case, no, na doon din sa Europe na case wherein nagkaroon ng transfer pricing issue but walang transfer pricing method na ginamit, no? So, nag-question ngayon yung taxpayer na against the tax authority na sabi ng taxpayer, how can this be a transfer pricing case wherein there is no transfer pricing method used? But since the issue is very apparent, no? Kasi ang transfer pricing naman is common sense. So the parang napaka clear talaga that there is a transfer pricing issue. Still, even without the transfer pricing method, the court sided with the tax authority, no? So panalo yung tax authority in that case. But the traditional talaga na transfer pricing analysis, you have to use the transfer pricing methods. Why? Because in the transfer pricing methods, sa transfer pricing, in order that you will know that the party adheres to the arm's length principle, you have to compare, no? And in comparing, you have to use different methods on how you compare the financial and commercial transactions of the taxpayers. And in this, we will just deal with the 5 methods, no? Yung other methods, as they come up na lang yan during the audit. So, ano yung guidelines ng OECD in choosing the right method? Because in making a transfer pricing analysis, which we are telling you that it is already now mandatory, anong sabi doon ng tax authority? you have to use transfer pricing methods, and you have to have a transfer pricing documentation. And in having a transfer pricing documentations, you have to come up with a transfer pricing analysis, no? Kaya nga pinili ko itong Adecco versus Supreme Court of Denmark. Why? Kasi nagiging issue dito na isang allegations ng Denmark Tax Authority or the SCAT na the tested party here or the Adecco company here na ito yung nakademanda, no? Meron silang transfer pricing documentation na ginawa, but it's not adequate, no? Ang sabi nila, kulang-kulang at hindi kompleto yung information na nandoon sa transfer pricing documentation. Kaya ang iniisip ko ngayon when I make a transfer pricing analysis report, I see to it na adequate, no? Yung ating transfer pricing analysis report. And of course, makatotohanan. Why? Kasi hindi yung kagaya ng gumagawa ka ng financial statements na basta gawa ka lang dyan ng gawa ng opinion, no? In the transfer pricing, sabi na nga natin, transfer pricing analysis should be factual. No? Walang although assumption is also pwedeng gamitin, but the transfer pricing itself is factual, no? So, ang I see to it na ngayon, masakit na yung aming mata sa sobrang first time in our history, gagawa kami ng 11 na transfer pricing analysis. Imagine. 3 lang kami. Imagine, no? You have to, at saka malapit na yung deadline. Although, naka-deliver na kami ng isa, so there are 10. Yung 7 na format na namin, lahat-lahat na may comparables na. Yung 3 na lang, Hari, no? Yung 3 na lang ang wala kaming comparables. Why? Kasi ang ibang work, mabilis na lang yung comparables ang matagal, no? Kasi you have to come up with information and then magre-request ka pa yung mga information about the comparables mo. Magre-request ka sa ESEC, ang tagal-tagal yung proseso, no? Kasi pagdating na ng mga information mo, ano mo pa yan, i-analyze mo pa, and then i-plot mo pa, gawan mo pa ng analysis, mga tables, gagawan mo pa ng mga charts, no? So, it will take a long time, and then especially na marami. No, yung 11, sobrang dami na yan. Kaya, anyway, we took it as a blessing kasi sa tagal na ng transfer pricing, ngayon lang kami nagkaroon ng ganyan karaming engagement, no, na 11 na transfer pricing report or 11 transfer pricing analysis, no. So, thank you kasi blessing sa atin yan. And in making a transfer pricing analysis, of course, anong sinasabi ng guidelines? You have to recommend the most appropriate method. Or sa RR2-2030 naman natin, which is our transfer pricing guidelines, anong sinasabi doon? The best method rule, no? You have to use all the methods and then recommend what is the best method, no? So, we will study the 5 transfer pricing methods as introduced in the transfer pricing guidelines. So, we have the comparable and controlled price method, no? So, dito tayo, Hari. No? So, ito po yung ating traditional na transaction methods, no? So, we start with the comparable and controlled price method. We compare the price, no? So, ano yung i-compare natin sa comparable and controlled price method? Of course, the price, no? Pagdating naman sa resale price method, ano yung i-compare natin? The gross profit. And pagdating sa cost plus method, the gross profit, no? Yung transactional profit method, mamaya natin yan. I-explain sa inyo. Ito munang traditional transaction methods, no? So, since sabi natin sa transfer pricing, in order that you can prove, kasi yung transfer pricing analysis report po na gawa natin na part of the documentation, ano ang purpose niyan? To show proof that the taxpayer adheres to the arm's length principle of transfer pricing. So, anong ipapakita mo? Na yung kanyang pricing of the goods and services is arm's length. Since sabi na natin arm's length, we compare the pricing of our client with that of the independent party. So, gagamit tayo ng methods. Ano i-compare natin? No? So, sa methods, ano i-compare natin? If you use the comparable and controlled price method, you compare the price. No? Para makita mo na itong price na binibenta ng taxpayer is price similar with that of the independent transactions. Bakit natin hahanapin yung independent party transactions? Because doon nga sa essence ng or rationale ng transfer pricing na related party transactions, there is an element of control. And when we say there is an element of control, there are artificial price management to control the price in order to minimize the payment of taxes. So, para malaman natin na tama yung price nila, hindi controlled, we have to compare it with the independent transactions wherein there is no element of control. So, anong i-compare natin dito sa unang method? We have to compare the price, no? So, when you compare the price, dapat meron ka information about the price of the product na pinoproduce ng taxpayer. And of course, para magamit mo itong comparable and controlled price method, you also have the information of the price of the product of the independent party that sells or produces the same product with that of your tested party. No? Kasi kung hindi mo magamit yung price. Why? Kasi yung price is dependent on the parehong-pareho sila, the similarities ng product para pwede mong i-compare. Kasi pag hindi na similar yung products, then you cannot compare. Then you have to do away with the comparable and controlled price method. So, when can you use the comparable and controlled price method? When you have the information, the relevant information about the product, and then ito namang price, saan po siya dependent? Because when we compare, we have to consider the 5 comparability factors, no? Ano yung 5 comparability factors natin? The number 1 is we have the nature or characteristics of the goods and services, no? So in this example, our price is dependent on the characteristics and nature of the goods or services. Why? Kasi pag nag-iba na yung nature or characteristics ng goods and services, hindi na sila comparable and there can be difference in price, no? So ano pa po yung ating comparability factors that we cannot do away when we analyze and applies also the method, no? So we have the functions, assets, and risk. Pag nakaiba na sila ng functions, nakaiba na ng assets, nakaiba yung risk, of course, hindi na rin sila comparable. No? And we also have the economic conditions. Of course, dapat yung pag nag-compare tayo ng price, it should be on the same market. No? Kasi baka same nga sila na product, but they are sold in different markets. So there is a difference in price. No? We have another comparability factors. Business strategies, no? Maybe that one company is selling the same product, pero meron siyang business strategies employed in order to gain market share or in order to introduce the product in the market. So, binababaan niya yung kanyang price. So, you have to consider also if there is a business strategies employed. And, ano pa yung next is the contractual terms, no? Yung product, binibenta yan at a certain price, pero may mga charges na nakatago dyan. So, hindi mo siya pwedeng i-compare with that of the other price kasi hahanapin mo yung difference, no? So, kailan po natin pwedeng gamitin itong comparable and controlled price method? We can use this if there is information about the product and then the product that you are going to compare are the same in market condition, same, halimbawa may business strategy siya, or the contractual terms is the same, no? And then the characteristics, yun ang pinaka-importante sa price, no? Dapat same sila na nature and characteristics para magamit mo itong comparable and control price method. Okay. Anong mangyayari when you are doing now the transfer pricing analysis report and when you compare the price of the controlled transactions, the independent transactions, hindi sila pareho, no? So anong mangyayari if you're doing the transfer pricing analysis? You have to recommend to the management to adjust, no? Kasi ang ibig sabihin lang, the company is not employing an arm's length price when it comes to the pricing of its goods, no? So, posible na magkaroon ng adjustment. So, you recommend to the management. Eh, ayaw ng management. Then, anong gagawin mo? If you are the independent analyst, then you make an adverse opinion, no? Kasi hindi mo naman pwedeng ilagay doon sa opinion mo na arm's length when in fact your figures will show na hindi arm's length, no? Parang yung case natin na nakaraan na ano yun, yung pharma distributor, no? Sabi nila doon sa goodwill na inamortize nila, hindi na dapat, pero nandyan, no? So ano yun? Parang sa law, sa doctrine natin na negative pregnant, no? Sabi mo hindi, pero umuo ka rin ba ng huli, no? So, ito po yung comparable and control price natin. Okay. Next na we are going to discuss is the traditional transaction method, the resale price method, no? Okay. Sa word pa lang na resale price, anong transaction dito? Resale price, you are a reseller or you acquire a goods or service tapos binibenta mo ulit, no? And then anong ginagawa mo pag nagbenta ka? Nagma-mark up ka, of course. Hindi ko nga malaman bakit yung iba, no? Binili yung goods ng 46 million, binenta lang ng 26 million, no? O kaya 35 million. So, anong nangyari? Anong nangyari sa costing? Alam nyo, in that case, hindi na siya kaagad kapanipaniwala. Why? Kasi your costing is already defective. And there is no business reasons or commercial rationality why you engage on that kind of transaction. Ano yun? Hindi ka nag-aaral ng accounting, no? Kasi business as an economic entity, bumili ka ng goods, binenta mo, nag-exert ka ng effort, damuhunan ka, ang purpose mo is to earn profit. So, bakit binili mo ng piso, binenta mo ng 75 centavos? So, ano dyan? Anong reason, no? Walang business reasons, no? So, hindi siya arm's length. Yung pricing mo ng goods and services is not arm's length. Okay, so the traditional resale price method, anong activity dito? You are buying a goods and then i-resale mo, no? So, anong kino-compare naman dito? Pagka resale price method yung gagamitin natin, we compare the gross profit. And kailan mo siya i-apply or pwedeng gamitin yung resale price method? If you buy a goods with the intention to resell it, no? At wala kang masyadong dinagdag na value, wala ka ng ginawa pa na kung ano-ano doon sa product na in-improve mo pa, ginastusan mo pa, no? Ang ginawa mo dito, bumili ka lang tapos binenta mo uli, no? Hindi ka na nag-add ng mga intangibles, kagaya ng iba. Yung nakikita ko na engage in the manufacturing daw ng sapatos. Ang ginagawa nila, pinapa-outsource lang yung paggawa ng sapatos. And then, pagdating sa kanila, sila na yung naglalagay ng packaging. No? Pangalan na nila yung nakalagay dyan sa mga boxes. And then, logo na nila, brand na nila yung nakalagay. No? So, in that case, yung resale price, hindi na siya pwedeng i-apply because ang dami mo nang dinagdag. Parang new product na siya, no? Hindi na siya yung product na binili mo. Tapos, ang dami mo nang dinagdag, nag-add ka pa ng intangibles mo. Ano yung intangibles mo dyan? Yung mga logo mo, ang trademark, those are intangibles, no? So, in that case, hindi ka na pwede dito sa resale price method. At anong sinabi ng guidelines? In that case, doon na siya papatak sa transactional net margin method. If you are employing intangibles, dapat doon ka na sa transactional net margin method. Dito sa resale price method, dapat binili mo and then binenta mo, no? Nagkaroon ka lang ng gross profit. So, yan po yung resale price method. Okay. Now, let's go to the cost plus method. No? Itong cost plus method naman, ano itong cost plus? Usually, these are applied to those who are seller of services or those who are service providers. No, anong ginagawa nila dito sa gross profit na to? So, sa cost plus method, nag-employ sila ng cost and then mag-a-add sila ng certain profit to cover their profit and cost, no? Or operating expenses and then their profit or income. So yan ang idagdag nila in order to have this certain transactions which is usually service provider, no? So pagka sabi natin na cost plus method, itong cost usually if the transaction, no, between related parties, the parent and the subsidiary, itong cost plus usually meron itong agreement or may contract, no? Kasi especially if service provider ka, hindi ka napapayag na walang kontrata. Ano yung kontrata? Dapat siya very clear in order to be enforceable. Kasi yung nabasa natin sa mga tax cases decided by the Supreme Court, especially yung case ng Coca-Cola, no? Versus, saan yun? IRS, no? Anong nangyari doon sa case ng Coca-Cola versus IRS? Hindi enforceable yung contract. Why? Kasi yung iba nilang mga agreement, may kontrata siya pero hindi malinaw, so hindi enforceable, no? Kasi walang consideration, walang di mo maintindihan yung kontrata. So, in that case, hindi siya enforceable. And yun nga sabi ko, yung isang experience ko dito, that the company has employing a cost plus method, and then they have an agreement with the parent company. And in that agreement, nakalagay na the company here in the Philippines or the subsidiary, meron siyang incurred na mga expenses that should be reimbursed by the parent company and then plus a markup of 5%. But when you try to look at the financial statement, ang gross profit rate niya is only 3%. So deficient siya ng 2%, no? So in that case, I recommend na mag-amend sila, but ayaw nila, no? So anyway, if you are the transfer pricing analyst, para din yan sa financial statement that the responsibility is still with the owner, no? Kasi ikaw magbibigay ka lang naman ng study or ng analysis. Okay. So, in the cost plus method, kailan po ginagamit ang cost plus method? Especially sa mga services or in the goods, manufactured goods that still requires additional process or mag-i-incur ka pa ng additional materials, magbibigay ka pa ng additional na effort in order na mabenta mo yung goods, no? So, mas maraming trabaho itong cost plus compared to the resale price, no? Kasi simple lang yung resale price method. Ang cost plus, pwede siya sa mga manufacturing companies, no? Pwede din siya sa mga service providers. Doon siya ginagamit or ina-apply. Itong sa resale price naman, sa mga distributor lang to or sa reseller, no? And then sa cost plus method, you compare the gross profit also just like the resale price method, no? Kasi bakit? Kasi mag-mark up ka dito sa cost. So ano yung gross profit mo and how is the gross profit being affected? 'Di ba sa accounting natin because yung mga valuation po natin recognition ng account we also follow, no? Transfer pricing also follows the accounting standards. So ano yung to arrive at the gross profit, ano muna yung dadaanan mo na account sa income statement? You have the sales or the revenue or the receipts, the gross receipts, and then less direct cost or the cost of sales. There you have the gross profit. So ano yung mga account that influence or affect the gross profit? Siyempre yung direct cost mo or kaya yung cost of sales mo. Kaya ako, when I make a transfer pricing analysis, yung mga companies na hindi sila naglalagay ng gross profit, no? Income na lang, and then expenses, and then net income. Nire-recompute ko pa based on the revenue regulations also ng BIR kung ano yung composition ng gross profit ng direct cost. Nire-recompute ko pa yung kanilang gross profit, no? Kasi bakit? Hindi mo malaman, no? Yung ginawa natin hari na company, no, na nilagyan nyo na ang gross profit niya is 100%.
Kasi walang cost of sales.
Wala siyang cost of sale. But if you try to look at the contract, no, meron siyang disclosures to the financial statement as to the contract with the parent company. Ano yung nakalagay doon? 10% markup. So, anong ibig sabihin ng 10% markup? Meron ka lang na 10%, no? Doon sa gross profit mo. Kasi cost mo sa direct cost mo plus markup ka lang ng 10%. So you have the gross profit rate of 10%, no? Kasi paano gross profit ka ng ano yun, magic na ang gross profit mo 100%, nagbenta ka, wala kang cost, no? Meron bang ganon? Nagbenta ka. Ano yung binenta mo? Hangin. No? Kasi walang cost kahit 5. No? 100% ka gross profit. No? So, ang transfer pricing is common sense. No? Kaya sabi nga ng OECD, transfer pricing is not an exact science, but it requires a lot of common sense. No? So, yun yung gross profit. So, kailan natin gagamitin yung cost-plus method? Doon sa mga manufacturing, sa mga service-oriented companies. Okay. So, let's now go to the transactional profit split methods, no? So, for the transactional profit methods, we have the transactional net margin method. Ano yung transactional net margin method? Ito yung same din siya ng cost plus at saka ng resale price method. But in this case, ang transactional net margin method employs intangibles, no? Kaya ano naman ang kino-compare na dito? The net margin. So, paano tayo, bago tayo makarating sa net margin, ito na yung profit natin, no? Especially, ito na yung operating profit natin. So, paano tayo makarating sa net margin? We have the sales, less cost of sales, less operating expenses, no? So, yun na yung ating net margin. So, there are so many factors that influence the net margin. Bakit? Kasi bago ka makarating sa net margin, dadaan ka muna, no? Doon sa operating expenses, doon sa direct cost mo, bago mo ma-realize itong net margin. So, at ano pa yung sabi ng guidance? Pag ang company already employs the intangibles, no? In the transactions, kailangan yung i-compare mo na yung net margin. Okay? So, yan. At ano pa yung, pagka net margin na yung ginamit mo, you use also the profit level indicator. Ano yung mga profit level indicator na sinasabi ng dito sa transactional net margin? Gagamit ka na ng ibang profit level indicator just like return on assets, no? Kaya nga doon sa Coca-Cola na case natin, ang profit level indicator na ginamit ng transfer pricing analyst is the return on assets, no? Kasi bakit? Kinumpare nila yung mga companies doon sa transfer pricing documentation nila or analysis. Lumabas na yung mga subsidiaries ng Coca-Cola earn as much as 286%, no? Doon sa kanilang return on assets. So, anong ibig sabihin nun? Na-divert yung ibang profit ng company doon sa subsidiaries. No? Kaya, sino ang parent company doon? The Coca-Cola na nasa US. So, since na-divert yung profit doon sa ibang company doon sa Latin America, ano ginawa ng uh, IRS? Pina-adjust yung profit ng subsidiaries na sobrang taas ang return on assets niya, pina-adjust na income yun ng Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola is the ones who own the intangibles, no? Kaya siya dapat yung mas malaki ang kita compared doon sa distributor lang, no? Kasi dito sa mga methods natin, affected din sila doon sa mga functions perform. Why is it that the distributor is just performing a simple functions? Samantalang itong Coke, nasa kanya lahat ng intangible siya na-develop, lahat ng know-how. Bakit mas maliit lang yung kita niya as compared doon sa distributor? No? So, anong ginawa doon sa case na yon? In-adjust yung profit ng subsidiaries at binigay sa parent company, which is the Coke. No? So, ano pa yung profit level indicator na pwedeng gamitin sa net margin? Ito yung BERE ratio. Ano yung BERE ratio, Hari? The operating income of net income over operating expenses, no? Kasi yung BERE ratio
Plus profit
over
over operating expense.
gross profit over operating expenses. Diyo? Sige, tingnan mo. No, so isang
Plus profit
over
operating expense.
oh. So gross profit over operating expenses, yan ang BERE ratio. At kailan niya na-discover ang BERE ratio? Sa transfer pricing lang, no? Noong nagkaroon ng dispute yung isang company na yung isang transfer pricing analyst nila nag-recommend ng BERE ratio. At ano yung BERE ratio? Gross profit over operating expenses. Bakit? Kasi, lalo na kung ang gross profit mo is negative na. So, anong mangyayari doon sa operating expenses mo? Sobrang taas na ng taas yung ratio. No? So, yun yung BERE ratio para makita mo kung gaano kalaki yung operating expenses mo as compared doon sa gross profit mo. And then we have also the return on capital employed, no? Kasi ano ba yung capital employed? Ito yung current assets less current liabilities equals your working capital, no? Isa din yan na profit level indicator dito sa transactional net margin method. So, kailan magagamit itong transactional net margin method? Kasi nga sabi natin, same lang siya with the resale price method and the cost plus method. Pwede siyang gamitin ang transactional net margin method if there is no available information or incomplete yung information at hindi mo magamit yung resale price and the cost plus method, no? And another is pagka ang transactions employs intangibles, no? May mga intangibles involved. So definitely hindi ka na pwede dito sa cost plus at saka sa resale price. Dito ka na sa transactional net margin method, no? And yung pinakamarami talaga na application is the profit split. Although sa actual ang karamihan na, ang ginagamit nila yung cost plus method. Pero sa totoo lang, if you try to analyze the transactions, they must use the profit split, no? Kasi gamit ko na yan doon sa yung nag-audit, no, na ang ginamit nila is cost plus method, but I recommend profit split. So kailan gagamitin naman yung profit split? Kung wala ka din na enough information about the companies, no? Para magamit mo yung resale price and also the cost plus method. But yung profit split method, marami itong na-dispute, no? Or marami nagcha-challenge. So, anong gagawin mo dito sa profit split? You split the profit no? Kailan to i-apply mo siya when the operation is highly integrated. Ibig sabihin lang na highly integrated, to complete the whole business transactions, mayroong contributions yung mga group, no? Each party makes unique and valuable contributions. So, kung meron silang valuable contributions, profit split talaga sila, no? Kasi hindi pwede na yung isa receive lang just reimbursement of the account tapos lahat ng profit napunta sa parent company. Yung subsidiaries na contribute din, maliit lang yung sa kanya, no? For purposes, sabi na nga natin, for transfer pricing purposes, for income tax purposes, we have to determine the profit of its party or entity. Pero sa totoong buhay, since group yan, and it is owned by the same person, irrelevant sa kanila kung na kaninong company yung profit. Why? Because the same group owns the profit. So whether it belongs or nandoon yan sa isang company, it doesn't matter to them. No? Kanino lang na matters na you have to determine the profit of its company. Yung tax authority. Especially if the group of companies are situated in different parts of the world. So anong dapat? Determine mo kung magkano yung income ng company sa Philippines so that the Philippines will also get its share in the tax that should be paid by the company, no? O kung nasa China yung ibang company na kasama din doon sa integration ng operation, then determine mo kung bawat country magkano yung income that should belong to it so that the proper tax will be paid also on that particular country, no? Sa profit split, mayroon dalawang klase. Ito yung contribution at saka yung residual, no? So, what is the residual profit split? Ito yung meron na tayong profit, no? Sige, dito na lang. Dito na lang natin i-describe, ha? Ito yung residual profit split at saka yung contribution. No? So, we were talking of profit split pa rin, na. So, profit split pa rin to. Dito sa residual profit, merong profit, ibawas mo dyan yung pertaining to the company, no? Based on its contribution, halimbawa, based on the unique participation. So, i-deduct mo muna yung share nung isang company na meron siyang malaking participation doon sa business. Yung matira na profit, no? Kung may matira pa na profit, saka pa lang yan i-divide, no? I-divide doon sa ibang group, no? Okay. And in dividing the profit, meron kang dito na mga variables na gagamitin or may factors. No, ano yung posibleng factors na gagamitin mo? Can be the assets employed, can be number of employees, depende kung ano yung participation ng company, no? Sa contribution naman, yung profit is divided directly based on the contribution ng company. Of course, may tinatawag pa dyan na kung ano talaga yung participation nila and contribution during the realization of that profit, no? So, ito, based on the contribution, dito, may residual pa. Babawasan mo muna ng ang profit doon sa kung sino yung may malaking contribution, and then yung matira, yun pa na lang yung i-divide among the group, no? So, yun po yung residual at saka yung contribution profit split, no? If you want to know more about the transfer pricing methods, no? So you have to look at the Revenue Regulations 2-2013, which is our transfer pricing guideline, and you have to look also at the OECD transfer pricing guidelines, and yung sabi ko yung latest sa atin, saan na yun? Yung 2018, June 2018 guidance on transactional profit split, no? Yun yung latest ng OECD. Hindi yan nakasama doon sa guidance na 2017 kasi 2018 siya. Okay? May shout out, Hari.
Shoutout po kay Sir Eugene. Eugene Cruz. Good evening daw po. Shoutout si Sir.
Sige, kasi tinawagan eh. No? And then, ilan yung viewers natin?
7 viewers po.
Okay. Sinabihan ko rin sila, Banji. Okay. So, yan po yung explanations natin on the transfer pricing methods, no? So, very important po yung transfer pricing method. Hindi pwede na gagawa kayo ng transfer pricing analysis and then kalimutan ninyo yung transfer pricing method. Because along the way kasi, especially if there are issues ka na makikita, na-review mo na yung mga contracts, no, parang ma-overwhelm ka, makakalimutan mo yung transfer pricing method. But since nandyan yan, nandyan sa guidance, you have to apply the transfer pricing method. And ano po yung sinasabi ng guidance? You have to determine the most appropriate method, no? Or sabi nung mga Indian companies, the MAM, no? The most appropriate method. Sabi naman ng ating guidelines, recommend the best method, no? So, the best method rule naman yung sa atin. Apply all the methods. I-apply mo daw muna lahat ng mga methods. Paano mo siya i-apply? Halimbawa, sa comparable uncontrolled price method, you compare the price. Umpisa pa lang, hindi mo na ma-determine. Kasi especially if the product is generic or imposible na makakuha ka ng mga price na makakompare ka, walang unique halimbawa yung product, so wala kang makuha na comparables, no? So anong gagawin mo? Explain mo na that the comparable uncontrolled price methods is not applicable in this case, and then explain mo na why, no? And then you try to apply also the resale price method. Anong sabi natin sa resale price method? You purchase the product, and then without so much process or additions to the product, binenta mo siya, no? So, you compare the gross profit. So, kailan mo naman siya gagamitin? If there is enough information at may comparables ka on that certain transaction, no? So, you can use the resale price method. Pagdating naman sa cost plus method, ano naman yung sinasabi natin sa cost plus method? The cost plus the markup, no? And then you compare the gross profit, no? Usually, it is applicable sa mga manufacturing companies or sa mga service providers, no? So, bago ko makalimutan, yung tatlong method na yan, the cost plus method, the resale price method, and the transactional net margin method requires the use of a tested party. Ano po yung tested party? Sila yung party to the transactions that has a less complex or hindi complicated yung kanyang operation. So, madali i-determine yung price, no? So, yun po yung tested party. You can use your company which is under transfer pricing analysis. Pwede mo siyang gamitin ng tested party or you can use a third party, no? Pwede rin. But it is very costly because you have to gather information also about your tested party. So in the case, ang maganda talaga na piliin mo na tested party, yung party to the transactions that has a less or not complicated na functions, no? Sa kanila yun. Okay. So, I have discussed to you all the 5 methods, no? So be very careful because you have to reflect that in your transfer pricing analysis report. And of course, sabi ko na nga sa inyo, when the taxpayer is already under audit, you might be summoned by the court if the case already reaches the court. No? Papa-explain sa inyo kung paano nyo ginawa. And in this case nga, i-discuss natin sa inyo ngayon anong sabi or findings ng tax court dito. Ang sabi niya, there is an inadequacy, no? Inadequacy of transfer pricing documentation. Hindi raw nagkaroon ng analysis, kulang-kulang yung mga documentation daw na ginawa, no? So yun yung and para sa kanila kasi at kahit sa atin na rin ngayon, the transfer pricing documentation is also already mandatory, no? Kaya ito na nga, napupuya tayo kasi ang dami na nagpapagawa because it is already mandatory for the companies with related party transactions. Okay? Ano oras na, Hari?
46 minutes. May shoutout, madam, si Ma'am Ferreira.
Okay.
Good evening daw po.
Good evening, Ma'am Fee. Always talaga si Ma'am Fee. Thank you for watching. Napakasipag po. Siya po yung president natin sa Tax Advisors Group, no? Hopefully, after the filing, may gathering na yung tax advisors, no? Kasi tapos na yung trabaho, magkaroon tayo ng parang get together naman, no? Pero siyempre, observe natin yung COVID, yung mga restrictions, yung social distancing, no? Okay. So, thank you very much for watching. Ilan na yung nagwa-watch sa atin?
7 viewers pa rin.
Okay, sige. Sige, maganda po yung ating discussions ngayon on the i-erase mo nga yung board kasi ano ko to, isulat ko ulit. Mahilig na ako ngayon sa sulat-sulat sa board kasi nakita ko mas madali siya na explain at saka mas maintindihan, no? Kasi tingnan natin yung case. This is Adecco AS versus the Supreme Court of Denmark, no? Ipakita ko lang sa inyo kung ano yung mga issues at saka yung nangyari dito sa case na to. Kasi tatapusin natin to ngayon eh. Maiksi lang kasi siya. Supreme Court na yung nagbigay ng decision dito, no? So tapos na to sa lower court. Sige. Okay. So, ano pong nangyari dito sa Adecco? No? So, meron tayong company. Ito yung Adecco Group. Based po siya sa Switzerland, no? And then, subsidiary niya yung Adecco AS sa Denmark. Okay. So ano po yung case na to? Adecco AS versus Supreme Court of Denmark. Si Adecco Group na Switzerland, ang business nila is human resource, no? Recruitment or agency sila. And they have a presence in 60 countries all over the world. No? So, si Adecco Group of Switzerland, meron siyang intangibles. No? And then, ano yung mga kasama dyan sa intangibles niya? Meron siyang network, no? Meron siyang process. And then, itong mga, si Adecco na to, AS, the Denmark, nagbabayad siya ngayon ng royalties dito kay Adequo, Switzerland. Dahil ginagamit niya itong mga intangibles ni Adecco, no? So, nagbabayad siya ng royalties. Ito naman si intangibles at saka ano ni Adecco Group, pinapagamit niya kay Adecco AS. Si Adecco AS naman, nagbabayad sa kanya ng royalties. So, magkano yung royalties na binabayad sa kanya? 2% at saka 4%, no? 2% para sa industrial at saka 4% for the professionals. No? And then, itong payment na royalties ni Adecco AS sa Adecco Group, dinideduct niya ngayon as an operating expense, no? Kasi royalties yan eh. So, anong nangyari dito? Kini-question siya ng Tax Authority of Denmark as to the payment of royalties. Kung dapat ba talaga na, is this 2% and 4% royalty payment for industrial employees employed, no? At saka 4% for the professional employees employed by Adecco AS based on the revenue ng Adecco AS. Doon naka-base yung royalties na binabayad niya sa Adecco Group. Ang sabi ng tax authority, that is not arm's length, no? Kasi mataas na masyado yung royalty na 2% at saka 4%. So, anong ginawa dito? During the case, no, yung sa lower court, doon sa palang sa Court of Tax Appeal, panalo yung tax authority, no? Ang ano lang sandali po. 5 minutes break, no, before we go further. Okay. Okay, sige. Our case po is about Adecco AS versus the Supreme Court of Denmark. So, let us discuss ano po yung nangyari dito, no? Because sabi ko nga sa inyo, during the trial of the case, isa sa naging issue nila dito, aside from yung payment ng royalties, is yung adequacy ng transfer pricing documentation. And this is very relevant sa ginagawa natin ngayon, which is the attachment to our income tax return, no? The transfer pricing documentation required. Okay? So, let us start with the case. Ano ba ang case na to, no? So, in this case, ang allegations ng both parties na meron silang mga reiterated their claims, kaya nga nakarating na sila sa Supreme Court, no? Okay. Ang nangyari kasi dito, pagdating may mga issues na sila na nanalo na sa lower court at saka uphold also by the Court of Tax Appeal nila, na panalo na yung SCAT doon or yung tax authority ng Denmark. Ang kagandahan dito, na nakarating siya sa Supreme Court, nag-present ng mga bagong evidence ang Adecco, no? At sino yung mga pinresent niya ng mga bagong evidence? Ito yung mga previous employees niya to show talaga na yung payment of royalty is justified, no? So, may nag-present siya ng mga bagong witnesses. Okay. So, Adecco AS, in this case, has submitted additional documents to the Supreme Court with a view to answering the Ministry of Taxation. Ito yung SCAT or ito yung Tax Authority of Denmark, no? Anuhan mo nga yung aircon dyan kasi mainit. O kaya i-on mo sandali itong ito. Okay, no? So, among other things, the annual reports for 2005 and 2009, no? Kasi ano yung mga tax years na involved dito. Meron siyang 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009 at saka 2009 lang, no? So, 4 years ang na-involved dito na case. Ang verdict dito po ng court is remanded to the tax authorities ang case, ni-reduce ang liability ng Adecco, pero yung nagbayad ng cost dito, yung tax authority, no? Yung SCAT. Okay, so anong nangyari dito? Si Jit Paulsen, no? Siya yung isang empleyado ng Adecco AS. Nagbigay siya ng testimony sa court, no? Anong binigay niya na testimony? Na employed siya ng Adecco for 5 years, no? And then, present siya in Denmark throughout the period and contractually employed by and paid by Adecco, no? Pero at present, hindi na siya empleyado ng Adecco, no? And pinakita niya na for the 2 years ng employment niya, she worked as international sales and support manager, no? And also tender manager in Denmark. During this period, she handled local tenders and inquiries from Danish customers, and secondly, the Danish part of the major international tenders and inquiries. No, sa testimony po nitong si Jet Paulsen, pinapakita niya dito na yung dinidispute ng tax authority na wala daw dapat bayaran na royalty, no? Kasi ang ginawa dito ng tax authority, sinero out nila yung payment ng royalty na hindi daw dapat, no? Kaya nga, ang sabi naman ng justice ng Supreme Court, kung i-zero mo yung payment sa royalty, parang sinasabi mo rin na walang services na ginawa yung Adecco na head office or the Adecco group or walang kwenta yung pagka-member nila doon sa group. So, ito yung mga nagbigay ng testimony to dispute to the allegations of the tax authority na walang bearing doon sa operation yung pagiging member ng Adecco AS with the Adecco group in Switzerland, no? So, anong testimony niya dito? Sabi niya, with regard to the local tenders and inquiries from Danish customers, the process took place, no, in such a way that she received materials from customers about the customer's needs. So, yun yung pinaka-functions niya, no? Why is it that it is very important also that you show? Kaya nga ako ngayon, ang ginagawa ko, pati yung service flow, no? Pinapagawa ko ng diagram, pati yung process flow, para makikita mo talaga kung ano yung participation ng bawat grupo doon sa services or ma-identify mo talaga kung ano yung functions, no? Kasi in this case, anong sabi ng tax authority dito? Hindi properly explained, no? Kung ano yung functions ng Adecco AS at saka yung Adecco group, no? So, the testimony also sinabi niya na how they are benefited with their connection to the Adecco group, no? Bakit? Kasi ang sabi niya, ang mga clients, no, na meron sila sa Denmark, referral din ng head office nila sa Switzerland. And that sometimes their clients in Denmark, instead na sa kanila tatawag, doon na mismo tumatawag, diretso na sa Switzerland, no? Okay. In her last 3 years at Adecco, she was Global Account Director, no? She worked with global sales and performed. Ito yung witness na kinuha ng Adecco. Performed general global functions across. She also tried to get as much business to Denmark as possible, no? So there were approximately 25 global account directors in the Adecco group located around the world, no? Imagine. However, not all operating companies necessarily had a global account director, no? So the functions was strongly associated with the head office in Switzerland. Oh, so anong ibig sabihin? Kasi ano siya, global account director siya, assigned in Denmark. Anong ginagawa niya? Strongly associated with the head office in Switzerland. Naka-connect talaga sila doon. As global account director, she had the global commercial responsibility for 5 major strategic clients. Sino yung strategic clients nila? At the end of her employment, the 5 customers were Mars, Unilever, Maersk, Vistas, and Carlsberg. No? She was the only global account director in Denmark. It made good sense that she was responsible for the strategic customers, which was headquartered in Denmark. No? So siya yung global director, pero naka-base siya sa Denmark, pero naka-closely integrated siya with the group in Switzerland. No? Okay. She was awarded the 2 large foreign customers, Mars and Unilever, because there were no more Danish customers of that size. No, imagine. She sometimes flew out to customers when tasks has to be started up. The large part of Carlsberg business won Adecco in 2017 through a European tender. The offer came to Adecco's global sales team in Switzerland from the Carlsberg Purchasing Department. Kasi anong pinapakita nila dito? The role, the participation, and the contribution of the Adecco group to the operation of Adecco in Denmark, no? Kasi kine-question nila na napakalaki ng binabayad ng Adecco AS Denmark sa Adecco Switzerland, na wala naman daw participation, zero, sinero nila, no? So anong pinapakita dito ng manager? Yung contribution, yung ginagawa ng Adecco Switzerland para sa kanilang operation, no? So the offer came to Adecco's global sales team in Switzerland from the Carlsberg Purchasing Department, which was also based in Switzerland. Adecco in Switzerland then delegated the tender to her predecessor as global account director who was in Sweden at that time. No? There were a number of other players in the market that were globally comparable to Adecco. So ito na yung pagka kasi ikaw ay industry player, you must know kung sino yung mga kalaban mo, no? Who are the other major players in that industry. Kasi pag gumawa ka ng transfer pricing analysis, isama mo yan sila, no? Hindi pwedeng hindi mo isama kasi sila yung the best na comparable in your study, no? So having roughly the same range of services and coverage in the world. So ito yung mga competitors nila. The typical competitors for Adecco in the global tenders were Manpower and Randstad. No? So yan ang kanilang mga kalaban. When choosing between the bidders, the most important thing for the large strategic customers was typically a balancing of several factors, including price, no? The services offered and the level of compliance. What processes the individual bidder has for hiring and screening temps. The financial situation of the local branches was often questioned. No? Patayin mo na. So the importance of the price as a parameter depended on what service was in demand. No? So in the temp business for which Adecco was best known, price was clearly a factor, and there was generally a price pressure in the market, also from the large strategic customers. However, these customers typically post the price in their main market, which was only rarely in Denmark. An example is Google, which negotiated hard on the price of the company's largest markets in the United States and Ireland. No, so ganyan din sila. Kasi ang sinusupply nila labor, no, or employees. At paano sila kumikita, no? Nagma-markup sila doon sa salary, no? Halimbawa, 10 pesos per hour lang yung employee na ibabayad nila, i-charge nila yung agency or yung company na kumuha doon sa employee ng 50% more, no? Kaya ang laki ng kita. So the price, on the other hand, was not so significant in the Danish market, where services and compliance promises were more important. With regard to the local Danish tenders which came from Danish companies directly to Adecco in Denmark, price was a somewhat larger factor. These companies did not necessarily place the same emphasis on what Adecco could deliver and how financially stable the company was. She does not know whether Adecco in Denmark could take a higher price simply because the company was part of the international Adecco group. Oh? Okay. So, yun yung nangyari dyan sa Adecco, no? So, ano pang testimony dito ng kanilang manager? Certain smaller Danish customers probably did not think much about Adecco's global presence. No? Yung mga maliliit daw na customer, hindi nila na-appreciate yung global presence ng Adecco. But there were also Danish companies for whom it made good sense to know that Adecco had delivered to reference customers in other countries and that the Danish Adecco company therefore be able to draw on such competencies. No? Kasi lalo na yung malalaking companies, mas gusto nila na may global affiliation or related na sa group yung isang company, no? It is her clear view that Adecco in Denmark received a number of inquiries which they would not have received if they have not been part of the Adecco group. So ang sabi niya, ang daming nag-inquire sa kanila, tumatawag because they are part of the Adecco group. So anong pinapatunayan niya dito? To justify the payment of the royalty and the role of the Adecco group to the operation of the Adecco Denmark. No? Okay. Another witness presented by Adecco in court, itong si Mickey Mayman, no, has explained among other things that he has been employed by Adecco AS since September 2005. During the period, he has held several different positions in the company, although always centered around sales and management. No? So in 2015, he was appointed CEO. No? Okay. Adecco AS is owned by Adecco SA, now Adecco Group AG in Switzerland. There is a significant collaboration between Adecco AS and Adecco Group, including on the concept part. No? So Adecco AS thus works on the basis of guidelines, procedures, and standard models which are accessed via the Adecco Group. No? So ito na naman ang pinapakita niya yung contribution ng Adecco Group to Adecco Denmark. No? So Adecco AS also has access to Adecco Group's its resources with regard to employee development courses and educations, just as Adecco AS also receives other administrative support from Adecco Group. No? So in relation to the financial area, Adecco AS also has access to Adecco Group's marketing resources, no? Campaigns, as well as the entire fire part, while includes the global sales structure with the global sales department that negotiates agreements in place with major international customers at a high strategic level. So ano ibig sabihin ng high strategic level? Competitive ka. This support leads to the so-called referred-in customers, which trades with Adecco AS solely because the companies have a larger turnover across several countries and thus enter via the Adecco Group. No? So ano naman yung pinapatunayan dito ni Mickey Mayman, yung sabi niya dito, the companies have a larger turnover across several countries and thus enter via the Adecco Group. No? So nagkaroon daw ng malaking turnover dahil nga member siya ng group. Okay. An example of a referral is Siemens. No, itong Siemens, malaking group din, which Adecco is received through the global sales in the Adecco Group. No? So, as Siemens was already a major customer of Adecco in Germany and Spain and knew of Adecco's work in these countries, the process took place in such a way that Adecco Group received a global request from Siemens. Adecco Group then contracted Adecco AS with a view to obtaining input on the local price conditions in Denmark. On this basis, the local Danish sales team prepared a price for Adecco AS based on their knowledge and understanding of the labor market and the wage level in Denmark, which Adecco Group then included the continued negotiations with the customer. Adecco AS receives approximately 50 to 60 inquiries from Adecco Group regarding such large international referred-in customers. No? So these customers came to Adecco AS because the company is part of the Adecco Group. So dito pinakita niya yung may instances scenario wherein nagagamit niya yung connection niya or link niya with the Adecco Group. Adecco AS in Denmark, as it makes good sense for customers to gather a large purchase of services from the same supplier across national borders. No, so in the global market, Adecco is up against other global players in recruiting and temporary staff. Okay, buksan mo nga muna yung pinto, Ari. Ano ako ng... Tsaka yung ventilador doon, buksan mo. Yung doon, Tsaka yung... Dali lang. Excuse lang po, kasi nauubusan. Ilang oras na? Ilang oras na? Kasi tapusin ko ito ngayon eh.
15 minutes.
So, 45 minutes pa. Okay. Sige. Okay, so ito na yung testimony ng another manager, no? Sabi niya, in the local Danish market, the situation is different, no? Kasi, in the global market, Adecco is up against other global players. Ganun naman eh, no? In recruitment and temporary staff, including, in particular, Manpower and Randstad, no? At this level, there are a maximum of 5 different players in the run-up to the tenders, no? So in the local Danish market, the situation is different, no? The local Danish market is very fragmented with few large and many small temp agencies. Sa Danish market naman, ang daming temp agencies or yung mga staffing agencies, no? Sa atin, recruitment agencies, no? Sa global market naman, mga malalaking players. Pero sa local market, ang daming maliliit, no, na players. There are approximately 700 temp agencies on the market, of which 84% of them have less than 50 employees. So, maliliit nga lang sila. Kaya fragmented, no? Including the secondary deputies. Based on the preferences of the Danish-based customers, there is a justification in the Danish market for both Adecco AS and the smaller temp agencies, no? So Danish customers with whom Adecco AS trades are typically those who are similar in value and organization to Adecco itself. Yung mahal yung serbisyo pero quality, no? Kasi meron naman na ang competition kasi pag pareho kayo ng services offered, magkakatalo kayo doon sa price ng services, no? So ang sabi dito naman ng Adecco, pagdating sa standard, mataas yung kanila pero quality yung services na binibigay nila. So this applies to a number of larger Danish companies that also have a local perspective, no? Just like Merck's and Vistas, but also large local Danish companies. Such companies find it interesting to work with Adecco AS due to Adecco's brand, no? The brand gives customers an expectation of, among other things, that there is control over labor market legislation and regulation, that Adecco has structured processes with internal and external audits, and that Adecco is a member of industry organization. This is weighted quite highly, no? So Merckx has been a good customer of Adecco AS on several occasions. Merckx was already a customer of Adecco AS when he started in the company in 2005, but they lost Merckx to Manpower in 2007 in a global tender. A few years later, they won back Merckx in a new global tender via the global sales team in Switzerland. No? So nawawalan sila ng customer, pero naibalik lang because of their team in Switzerland. No? So ito yung gustong ipakita nila sa court, yung role na nagagawa ng Switzerland with their operation in Denmark. Merckx chose Adecco AS because Merckx was given the opportunity to trade with Adecco in several countries and as a result of Adecco's compliance. No? Vistas, another company na naman to, recently contacted Adecco AS regarding temporary staffing in Denmark. Vistas took over Adecco AS due to the Adecco Group, no? So ito yung mga nakuha lang sila ng Adecco Denmark because they belong to the Adecco Group, with which Vistas had a global agreement, but which did not apply to Denmark, no? So Adecco Group referred Vistas to him. Oh. So sino na naman yung nag-refer ng Vistas, which is also a big company? Ni-refer lang sa Denmark, no? Adecco Denmark. Vistas already has a local supplier in Denmark, but in the future wishes to divide the business turnover between the local supplier and a global supplier where Adecco AS will occupy the latter position. No? Okay. Ano pa yung naging experience niya? Adecco AS receives direct inquiries from foreign customers. This happened in connection with the Fehmarn Belt project, where Adecco AS received direct inquiries from German and French companies because the companies were used to working with Adecco in their home countries. No? Kaya kinukontak sila sa Denmark ng mga companies because meron na silang affiliation doon sa ibang company ng Adecco, no? Sa home countries nila. Okay. Because Adecco brand made them feel safe, no? So, parang sa mga branded din na mga goods, no? You feel safe na hindi imitation, hindi ka nagkakamali ng bili, no? Ganon din sa services. The same was the case on the Metro City Ring project, where Adecco AS received direct inquiries from 10 to 12 Italian companies because the company had a reference relationship with Adecco. No? So, na-establish niya talaga yung role ng Adecco Group. So, it applies to many of the customers that Adecco AS trades with today that Adecco AS would not have the opportunity to do so if the global element were not present. No? So, kung hindi daw present yung global element nila, wala yung mga ganong transactions. No? So, internally, in the management group in Adecco AS, they occasionally discuss how Adecco AS could run its business outside the Adecco Group. No? The key point for him, however, has always been that Adecco AS benefits from the Adecco name. No? So, bakit siya naka-benefit? Sa pangalan pa lang. No? It may vary slightly from year to year, but approximately 60% of customer turnover today in Adecco AS is brand-related. No? So he can therefore not see a future for Adecco AS without the Adecco brand. No? Okay. Also, from the point of view of the Adecco Group, it is an advantage to be widely represented in the world, including in Denmark. It forms part of the value that Adecco Group offers to the major global customers, such as Amazon, that they can help the customer anywhere in the world. No? So, bakit nila to pinuprove na talagang may nagagawa yung being an affiliate of the group, no? Kasi nga, sinisero ng tax authority, yung payment of royalty nila, dinidisallow lahat, no? Okay. When he was brought to Adecco in September 2005, he saw a company that had big growth plans and which focused on developing and professionalizing the business, among other things, by making business lines. So from 2005 to 2007, sales grew by about 50%, no? As there was high demand throughout the market. The execution of the plans faltered, however, and it did not go very well. It was also a pity that Adecco AS invested so heavily right up until the financial crisis, which hit at the end of 2008, and which showed that the market down sharply. He clearly remembers how 50% of the market disappeared very quickly as a result of the financial crisis. Many players disappeared from the market, but the big players survived. Yun lang, no? Adecco AS received capital from Adecco Group on several occasions. Without the liquidity supplies, Adecco AS would have had to close, no? So, ano pa yung tinulong ni Adecco na group? Supplyan siya ng capital, no? Ginfuse ng capital sa kanya. Okay. He was sales manager at the time but was close to the management and was involved in all execution plans. No? Beside liquidity additions, he also saw it as a positive factor to be part of Adecco's concept. It was important that customers knew that Adecco AS would also be on the market in 1 to 2 years when the financial crisis was over. It gave customers peace of mind that Adecco AS was part of the Adecco group. It was and is not a real alternative for Adecco AS to become an independent Danish company outside the Adecco brand. No? If you abandon the Adecco brand, a large part of the customer portfolio will disappear. No? Just to give weight to the affiliation nila with Adecco Group. Na sabi niya, tanggalin mo yung Adecco brand, no? Large part of the customer portfolio will disappear. So, pag tinanggal mo yung pangalan ng Adecco, mawala din sa kanila yung mga malalaki nilang kliyente, no? So, namely, the customers who emphasize that Adecco AS is part of a global supplier and not just a local supplier. Okay. Okay. So, anong ginagawa po ni Adecco Denmark? Siya ay isang temp agencies or staffing agency, no? Ano ba yung temp agencies? An employment agency is an organization which matches employers to employees, no? So, in developed countries, there are multiple private business which act as employment agencies and a public funded employing agencies. Okay. Ito yung magandang i-emphasize ko sa inyo eh. Okay. Although Adecco is clearly has a tight economy, no? This does not change the fact that a royalty of 2%, no? General staffing, where the majority of Adecco is business is located, corresponds to the brand value that the company receives and need, no? This is a relatively large expense, but he does not see the royalty agreement as being unreasonable. Has not considered whether it would be reasonable to try to reduce the royalty payment regarding professional staffing. Bakit? Magkano ba yung professional staffing na rate of royalty? 4%, no? So, i-reduce daw yung royalty payment regarding professional staffing from 4% to 2%, no? After Adecco AS in the tax case has acknowledged that the deduction for the royalty payment regarding professional staffing is set to 2%, no? Has not been involved in the discussions about whether the royalty rate should be reduced as a result of the corona crisis. No? Meron pa silang isang pinresent din na witness, itong si Mads Harry Debro, no? He explained, among other things, that since March 2016, he has been employed by Adecco AS as CFO, no? As it called, under the auspices of Adecco. Okay, so sino to si Mads Harry Debro is a country finance manager, no? He is responsible for the finance and accounting function in the company, which includes responsibility for accounting systems and remuneration. He is involved in the company's bidding, no? Thus, he must approve credit ratings of customers below a certain rating to ensure the customer's credit worthiness, just as he or Mickey Mayman must approve customer contracts above a certain size. Its purpose is primarily to ensure that the contract as a whole is profitable in light of the internal cost and the prices offered. No? So, wag pasok lang ng kontrata na malulugi naman. Adequacy covers a broad customer segment. No? Ito yung industrial segment, the Horeca segment is cleaning and canteen, but also specialists, no? Engineers or financiers. Adecco has Microsoft as a customer who needs specialists in the development of quantum computers. These can be large international customers, but also local customers. Both large and small, the contractual relationship is different depending on the specific customer. No? Okay. The relationship with the major international clients typically rests on major global agreements and invoice large numbers of temps. Sometimes the quantities in Denmark in isolation can be smaller, but be large worldwide. Unless Danish customers enter into a temporary employment contract, they are physically entered into day-to-day or week-to-week. No? So, ganun siya ka extensive. No? The large international customers typically do not contact Adecco AS directly but are referred in customers. No? The process usually takes place in such a way that the international customers procurement department contact Adecco groups. Global sales department, which has people who are specialists in making global agreements. No? So the agreements are thus typically entered into a global level, after which the local Adecco companies in Denmark, Adecco is implement and deliver locally under the global framework agreement. Normally, the implementation will take place relatively strictly under the terms of the global agreement, but there may be certain issues that are only clarified in connection with the implementation locally. No? So it can revolve around which system is to be used and how quickly it must be possible to deliver substitutes to the customer at short notice. No? So in some cases, the price can also be agreed locally if it is not stipulated in the framework agreement. In other cases, the price is set in the framework agreement. The collaboration locally generally consists of an ongoing dialogue with the customer about how the customer's local needs are best met under the global agreement. Examples of referred in customers to Denmark include Vista, Siemens, and ISS. Okay. The price of Adecco AS services is typically obtained by looking at the salary of the temporary staff and the local cost and taking into account an administration fee. So you assess the size of the back office and front office cost and how you will able to run a positive business on the customer in question. No? So most often, Adecco AS will send a salesperson out to the customer to give a presentation. Adecco AS is not known for being the cheapest, so they try to emphasize the quality of the temps they provide and the high degree of supplier security they have. Huh? Okay. Ilang oras na?
1 hour 35 minutes po.
Okay, so 25 minutes more. Ah, marami pa to. Bale. The price of Adecco AS services is typically obtained by looking at the salary of the temporary staff and the social cost and taking into account an administration fee. You assess the size of the back office and front office cost and how you will be able to run a positive business on the customer in question. Most often, Adecco AS will send a salesperson out to the customer to give a presentation. Adecco AS is not known for being the cheapest, so they try to emphasize the quality of the temps they provide and the high degree of supplier security they have. No? So this is important for many of their customers. No? Their system is also a competitive parameter as the system allows the customers to give pro forma invoices immediately when the customer approves hours in the system. So this is appreciated by more customers, especially those which have great variation in the vacancies. In addition, it is inevitable that prices are discussed with customers, although there is a difference in what is most important to each customer. All customers are, of course, interested in the price. This is particularly true in the public segment where Adecco AS is not so large. No? Several of the customers appreciate that Adecco AS is present throughout Denmark, just as it is important for several of the large customers that address AS is a part of an international group. No? So the customer can have a global entered into a framework agreement across all countries, which is then implemented locally by Adecco AS in collaboration with the customer's local subsidiary. No? So example niya is the letter customer are ISS, Carlsberg, and Merckx, which are very large globally, but which also have a certain size in Denmark. No? So it's his feeling that the customer waiting of Adecco's international presence is an increasing trend, but he does not have a real factual basis for the trend. Only a few players in the market can deliver as Adecco AS. Adecco AS is primarily in competition with Randstad and JKS. In addition, there are a lot of smaller local temp agencies in Denmark which only have about 50 temps. No? Okay. Ano pang sabi dito ng witness? The most important thing that the royalty payment to the Adecco Group provide access to is Adecco's brand and access to customers. No? So all customers know that Adecco brand and know what it stands for. The Adecco brand provides a quality experience. The global presence is also part of the Adecco brand. It is different all depending on the situation the customers are in. Who places emphasis on the quality, stamp, or presence? Adecco AS may well have customers who primarily have production in one place and simply want substitute for these customers. No? Sabi niya, Adecco brand in itself means something to the customers as an expression of delivery, quality, and flexibility around them. Other customers know the Adecco brand for its international presence and find Adecco AS attractive because of this relationship. No? So Adecco also has a CR program that certain customers who go up to CSR themselves are aware of and appreciate. No? Okay. Okay. Okay, so ito pa yung mga continuation po ng testimony po ng manager, no? Okay. So, the testimony believes that the Adecco brand has been reflected in Adecco AS bottom line during the time he has been in the company in 2016. The result for 2016 was not far from the result at comparable companies in this industry. Although there were companies that performed better, he does not know if the Adecco brand was reflected in the bottom line in 2006 and 2009. Okay. Ano sabi niya dito? He believes that a royalty of 2% makes sense in relation to the value that the Adecco brand delivers to Adecco AS. No? Adecco AS has other challenges in relation to being better at making money. During the period in which he has been employed by Adecco AS, the challenge has been an arbitration case with a trade union, which has had a severe negative impact. The majority of the arbitration proceedings have now been settled, no? And at Adecco AS will therefore have a great opportunity to make a profit in the future. No? So it has gone significantly better in 2019 than in previous years, but there will still be a deficit due to large cost for the arbitration proceedings. No? He cannot explain why Adecco AS has not tried to reduce the royalty rate for professional staffing from 4% to 2% vis-a-vis Adecco Group. No? After acknowledging that only a deduction of 2% has been granted, no? He has not been part of the discussion about this. He is not surprised that it has not been done. No? Okay. Okay. Tapos na yung mga tatlong testimony ng mga pinresent ng Adecco sa court, no? So, ano na ngayon? Place in law, no? Adecco AS has started in particular that the company has prepared transfer pricing documentation. Ito na, no? So, nire-reiterate na nila dito yung transfer pricing documentation. That includes the royalty payments, no? The transfer pricing documentation complies with the statutory content requirements, no? The current Executive Order number 42 of 24 January 2006 on documentation of the pricing of controlled transactions, or the TP Transfer Pricing Documentation Executive Order. In any case, the transfer pricing documentation is not deficient to such a significant extent that the matter must be equated with a lack of documentation. No? SCAT has thus not been entitled to make a discretionary assessment. The current provisions in 3B, paragraph 8, no? Paragraph 3 of the Tax Control Act. In return for the royalty payments, no, magkano yung royalty payments na binabayad dito ni Denmark, no, sa parent company niya, group in Switzerland, no, 4% for the professionals and 2% for the industrial, no? Okay. In return for the royalty payments, Adecco AS has received an exclusive right of use of the Adecco brand in Denmark. No? Know-how and access to international customers. Revenue from international customers refer to the company through the Adecco network significantly exceeds royalty payments. No? Sobra-sobra yung binabayad. The license agreement has a value for Adecco AS. And the royalty payments are deductible. Ito na yung kina-question ng tax authority. Kung i-allow ba na deduction ang royalty payments sa income. Okay. So the license agreement has a value for Adecco AS and the royalty payments are deductible. No? And practice pursuant to this provision on operating cost. Accordingly, it appears directly from Scott's consultation response during the proceedings before the National Tax Court. The Scott agrees with the company that the consideration received by the company for the royalty payments is of economic value and that the Scott has given the company a reduction for royalty by the chains of employment. The High Court, on the other hand, has improved a burden of proof, which is significantly in addition to that resulting from the practice of deducting operating cost. No? The crux of the matter then is what constitutes a market rate. No? This question, which concerns the size of the royalty payments, is decided in accordance with Section 2 of the Tax Assessment Act. Okay, so it follows from draft legislation, practice, and literature in the area of that the Ministry of Taxation has the burden of proof. No? Okay, so ano pong sabi dito? The ministry has not carried out an arm's length analysis. Page 14 na ako, ano? May paging ba yan? Pangatlong page siya magmula doon sa dinidiscuss ko. No? Diyan na siya sa second paragraph, no? Okay. So in addition, Scott discretion, even if it was authorized, must be exercised in accordance with the OECD's guidelines on transfer pricing. However, the estimate including taxation of the contrived marketing transaction is clearly in breach of the guidelines and there is therefore legal defect in the exercise of discretion. Okay. Finally, several of the assumptions built into the basis of the income are factually incorrect. No? So the Ministry of Taxation erroneously assumes that Adecco AS has paid royalties for national customers. No? Similarly, the ministry assumes that there is a clear connection between royalty payments and losses, just as the ministry's statement after correction for royalties does not take into account the turnover from referred international circumstances. No? Denial of the deduction and the subsequent change of employment can thus not be upheld. No? Okay. The Minister of Taxation has stated in particular that Adeco AS has not lifted its burden of proof that there is a deduction for the royalty payments to the Swiss parent company for the use of the Adeco trademark and access to an international Adeco customer network. The royalty payment have not had the necessary connection to the income acquisition. Section 6, letter of the State Tax Act on Operating Cost, and it is thus correct to override the tax deductible deductions. No? Okay. Okay. So the royalty rate is at group level without considering any market value for Adecco AS. So there is no assessment from the company or the Adecco group of whether the rate makes sense for the Danish market. In the temporary employment market in Denmark, price is by far the most important competitive parameter and brand loyalty is low. Of the industry survey from 2010 and the company's own notification to the EU Commission in connection with one of the operating companies' merger, FAR is not a relevant competitive parameter and an independent party would not have paid for access to a brand that had no value for the acquisition of income. No? So the acquisition of the large customers in Denmark is related to Adecco AS market positioning or referrals from local operating companies. This is not something that Adecco AS must pay the group's parent company for either in the form of payment for network or brand. It is an inherent advantage of being part of an international company and not a service for which someone can demand payment. The OECD's guideline on transfer pricing, no? So ayaw nila talaga na magbayad yung Adecco Denmark doon sa Adecco group or the parent, no? Ano pa? Adecco AS has also not documented that the company actually made money from referred customers or otherwise benefited from it. Ito yung contention ng tax authority, ha? Okay. On the other hand, the group has had an independent interest in maintaining a local royalty-paying operating company in Denmark, even though the company has continuously realized losses. It is also not documented that as a result of the royalty payments Adecco AS has received benefits of any kind, not even the form of know-how about the temporary staff market pricing. The same time, in the period 2006 to 2009, Adecco AS incurred such significant own marketing expenses that this is in itself speaks against the value of the right to use the international brand having an independent value for the company's own income acquisition. Okay. If the royalty payments are deductible, ito yung argument ng tax authority. The deduction value is eliminated in any case by the fact that Adecco AS has not been compensated or remunerated for the work and expenses that the company has assumed in the parent company's interest. Kasi nga sabi niya, hindi magbabayad yung Adecco sa group kasi yung Adecco naman, hindi rin siya binabayaran ng group doon sa mga serbisyo na ginagawa niya. Adecco AS marketing of the Adecco brand has taken place in the parent company's interest, and the marketing did not result and was not expected to result in a profit in Adecco. No? Kaya nga puro net loss si Adecco. The marketing benefits exceed the royalties paid, no? Kasi ang laki ng binabayaran niya royalties. And any deduction value is thus eaten up by the increase in income that follows from non-income recognition of the marketing fee. No? So the tax authorities have been entitled to assess both the controlled transactions, the royalty payments and the marketing fee at their discretion. The non-market trade between Adecco and the parent company in itself means that the tax authorities have been entitled to assess the controlled transactions at discretion of Section 2 of the Tax Assessment Act. The discretion also follows from the fact that Adecco AS transfer pricing documentation suffers from a number of serious deficiencies. So ano sabi niya? Yung transfer pricing documentation daw ng Adecco AS, ang daming deficiencies, no? Which has meant that Scott could not, on the basis of the documentation, assess whether prices and conditions were determined in accordance with the arm's length principle. No? The current provisions in Section 3B. Okay. Okay, ano sabi niya? Adecco transfer pricing documentation in no way meets the requirements. The controlled transactions regarding the marketing fee is not mentioned in the transfer pricing documentation. Kaya nga, kailangan sa gumagawa ng transfer pricing documentation, lahat sabihin mo na, no? The documentation basically does not relate to Adecco AS functions, assets, and risk, no? Pati yung assets and risk daw ng functions ng Adecco AS hindi rin nakarelate. The very conclusion of the transfer pricing documentation is also undisputedly incorrect. No? So, incorrect daw yung transfer pricing documentation. Ang conclusion, no? That company has subsequently acknowledged that no action was taken on arm's length terms in the made and tax declared payment of a royalty rate of 4% relating to the professional segment. The reason for the erroneous conclusion is that the documentation does not take into account the specific condition in the datings market where price is the only real competitive parameter. No? It appears from the transfer pricing documentation that there were no comparable external agreements between the parent company and third parties, but subsequently Adecco AS has presented a number of agreements which the company now believes are decisive in the case and which entail a breach of company's own tax return. No? So the company's argument is an expression of a recognition that the transfer pricing documentation is deficient. Kulang-kulang, no? Okay. Yan yung sinasabi niya. Okay. So, ito naman yung reasoning ng court, no? The Danish company Adecco AS, ultimately owned by Adecco Group AG, formerly Adecco SA, which is headquartered in Switzerland. Adecco Group is one of the world's largest temporary and staffing companies with activity in more than 60 countries. Ang laki niya, no? Adecco Group owns the intangible assets in the group and makes them available to subsidiaries and other licenses through license and franchise agreement. So, yun ang business ng Adecco Group. No? Nagla-license siya, nagre-recruit siya, and ang kapalit nun, nagbabayad ng royalties yung mga companies niya. Since 1997, Adecco AS has operated under the Adecco brand and paid royalties to the Adecco Group to use the Adecco name in Denmark. No? Okay. So, in the period from January 2003 to June 30, 2006, Adecco AS, nasundan mo, Hari? Paid royalties with 1.5% of its turnover to Adecco Group, no? So the agreement included the right to use the trademark Adecco in Denmark, know-how about the temporary employment industry, and access to the international Adecco network, no? Okay, so with effect from July 2006, The agreement was revised and Adecco is then paid royalties with 2%, no? So nag-increase from 1.5 naging 2% na of the turnover from the company's industrial segment, no? To yung mga temporary workers for office and industrial work. And magkano pa? 4% of the turnover from the professional segment, mainly temporary workers with long-term education such as engineers, economists, lawyers, and doctors, no? So pagka ganyan, 4% yung royalty na i-remit ng Adecco Denmark to Adecco Switzerland, no? So from 1.5% naging 2% siya, naging 4%, no? Okay. The case concerns the employment of Adecco is taxable income in the income year 2006 to 2009. So ito yung assessment. Adecco has declared a total deduction for royalty payments for those income years of a total of almost 84 million Danish krone. Ang laki, no? By decision of January 29, 2013, SCAT, now the Danish Tax Agency, made a discretionary assessment of royalties paid by Adecco AS to Adecco Group in these income years and reduced this to 0, no? Talagang dinis-allow niya yung payment to royalties. The National Tax Court upheld the decision on November 10, 2017. Panalo siya doon sa Tax Court, National Tax Court, o yung sa atin, the Court of Tax Appeal. The question is primarily whether Adecco AS payment of royalties is a deductible expense. So yun ang question dito, kung deductible expense ba ang royalties. The question is whether Adecco AS transfer pricing documentation suffers from such deficiency that the tax agency has been entitled to assess the royalty rate at its discretion. Kasi sabi niya, defective yung transfer pricing documentation, kaya ang discretion nasa tax authority na sa paggawa ng assessment, no? There are no such deficiency. The question is whether the agreement on the royalty rate has been entered into on arm's length terms, and in this connection, whether Adecco AS has performed marketing services for Adecco Group without consideration or compensation so that the deduction value for royalty is offset by non-recognition of these services. Hindi daw binabayaran ni Adecco Group si Adecco Denmark, kaya wala ring royalty dapat na mangyayari, no? Okay. So, ano ang question on operating cost? No? There is access to deduct operating cost from the taxable income, no? The expense used during the year to acquire, secure, and maintain the income, no? So, the Ministry of Taxation has stated that the royalty payment have not had the necessary connection to the acquisition of income. So, kaya nag-present ang Adecco ng mga managers niya kasi ang sabi nila, wala daw connection yung payment ng royalty doon sa acquisition ng income. So, kahit na daw hindi ka magbayad ng royalty, hindi mo gamitin yung brand name or intangible na Adecco Group, magkakaroon ka pa rin ng income, no? Okay. The Supreme Court finds that the payment of is for the trade of customers from the group's international network has the necessary connection to the acquisition of income for a company such as that carried out by Adecco AS, even if the company as a whole, the period has a negative operating result. Following the presentation of evidence, the Supreme Court finds that the payment cover real benefits to Adecco AS. No? The payment are therefore in the nature of deductible operating cost, Section 6, letter A of the State Act. Ng Supreme Court, deductible yung royalty payment as operating cost, no? As operating expense. Okay. The significance of the joint venture between Adecco AS and Adecco Group and the Ministry of Taxation objections to the amount of the royalty paid must then be assessed according to the rules on correction, according to the arm's length principle of transactions between related parties. So, yung transfer pricing law ang ginamit dito. So, transfer pricing documentation, ano sabi? It appears from the current provisions of the tax control that if the taxpayer has not prepared the statutory documentation for pricing transaction between related parties or transfer pricing documentation, the tax assessment can be made at discretion. No? In its judgment of 31 January 2016, the Supreme Court has ruled that the transfer pricing documentation that is so deficient that it does not provide the tax authorities with a sufficient basis for assessing whether the arms and lack of documentation. Kung kulang yung transfer pricing documentation mo, tantamount na yun sa lack of documentation as if wala kang documentation. Okay. Okay. Ministry of Taxation has stated that Adecco AS transfer price documentation is deficient to a significant extent. In particular, the ministry pointed out that a controlled transaction consisting of Adecco AS market the trademark of the parent company's interest is not mentioned in the transfer pricing documentation. No? That the documentation does not contain adequate functional analysis. Ito yung defect ng transfer pricing documentation. Actually, I am guided by this no, na kulang-kulang yung functional analysis mo, function sa assets and risk. Kailangan naka-disclose lahat, no? That the conclusion itself is undisputedly incorrect as Adecco is now acknowledges that a royalty payment of 4% for the professional segment is not arm's length terms. So, nag-acknowledge na rin si Adecco na yung 4% is talagang mataas, no? Hindi siya arm's length. No? Okay. So, the Supreme Court finds that Adecco transfer pricing documentation for the income year 2006 to 2009 was not deficient, no? Sabi na yan ng Supreme Court. So, yung allegations ng tax authority na kulang-kulang yung transfer pricing documentation, sabi ng Supreme Court, hindi, no? Significant extent, it could be equated with lack of documentation. The Supreme Court has hereby emphasized that the fact that the Danish tax agency disagrees with or raises justified doubts about the comparability analysis does not in itself imply that the documentation is significantly deficient. In addition, the Supreme Court has hereby emphasized only in the agency disagrees with or raises justified doubts about the Ministry of Taxation has not further demonstrated the significance of any missing or insufficient functional analysis for the specific assessment of whether the arm's length principle is complied with, nor can the late presentation of license agreements with third parties itself justify an access for the Danish tax agency to make a discretionary employment. Okay. So the Supreme Court finds that Adecco AS income could not be assessed at discretion pursuant to Section 3B. No? So, assessment of arm's length conditions. The question then is whether the Ministry of Taxation has proved that Adecco AS royalty payments to Adecco Group are not in accordance with what could have been achieved if the transaction had been concluded between independent parties. Okay. Anong oras na, Hari?
2 hours, 9 minutes.
2 hours. Okay. So, basahin ko na lang ang, yung decision ng court, no? Anong nangyari dito? Okay. Okay, anong sabi niya dito? The free market price method, no? Or the comparable uncontrolled price method, no? Must be used to compare the agreed price between the related parties and the price on similar goods between independent parties, whether the market in which the goods are economically comparable. Okay. Adecco has entered into licensing agreements with several independent companies to use the Adecco brand. The agreements cover China, Mauritius, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Panama, South Africa, Russia, and Ukraine. Several of the companies have previously been part of the Adecco Group. As stated by the High Court, these license agreements relate to markets that must be considered significantly different from the Danish market. No? So it can be assumed, no, that the employment market is national. Okay. Due to language barriers and the client loyalty is low. This is confirmed by the Adecco Group in the company's notification to the AO competition authorities. As stated by the High Court, it can also be assumed that the price of temporary services in Denmark must be considered by far the most important competitive parameter. Kaya nga, comparable and controlled price. Why? Kasi nandyan yung price, no? It also appears from a report from DI on the temporary employment industry that price is the only real competitive parameter. In its explanation, Adequacy ASC was confirmed that the price pressure in the temporary staffing market in Denmark is greater than in other countries. No? Okay. According to the explanation from the CEO, it can be assumed that the Danish company has not negotiated with the parent company on a different royalty rate than the one demanded by the parent company. Furthermore, there are no consideration in Adecco AS transfer pricing documentation as to whether the difference between the Danish temporary staffing market and other market could justify a lower rate than that with Adecco Group generally requires. Only after the case was brought did the company acknowledge the 4% demanded by the parent company of turnover in the professional segment was not an arm's length term. Kaya dito sila sa 4%, no? Parang nag-concede sila, in-accept nila na hindi arm's length. It can then be assumed that the special conditions in the Danish temporary market, where the value of a brand must be considered modest, have not been taken into account, and that the royalty rate, which according to the information is the same for all geographical markets, is unilaterally determined by the Adecco Group. No? Against this background, we find that the tax authorities have proven that an independent Danish temp agency would not have agreed to pay the required 2% and 4% respectively in royalty of the turnover, corresponding to an average of approximately 20 million. Okay. So, we agree that an condition for royalty payment cannot be set at zero, no? As determined by Scott. However, after the above, we find that there is a basis for a significant average of for the payment of royalties. So, ginawa nila. So, we a case to the tax authorities for reconsideration. So, niremand yung case sa Scott, no? Sa tax authority. Pero, anong nangyari dito? Pinabayad ng Supreme Court ang tax authority ng 10,000 at saka 1 million. No? So, kaya ang total dito is 1,010,000. Okay. So, anong nangyari dito? The Scots increase in Adecco AS taxable income for the income year reduced by 15 million. And then sa 2007, reduced by 19 million. 2008, reduced by 17 million. 2009, 9 million. Pero yung 2010, hindi nakasama, no? Hanggang 2009 lang. And then the High Court and the Supreme Court, the Ministry of Taxation must pay the 1,010,000 to Adecco AS, no? So, siya yung magbabayad sa Adecco. Yan po yung ano dito. And the amount of legal cost must be paid within 14 days after the Supreme Court has ruled and bears interest, no? So, yan po yung case natin on Adecco AS versus the Supreme Court of Denmark, no? Ano yung issue dito? Yung payment of royalty na 2%, at saka 4% na inako naman ng Adecco AS na mataas nga. And then, yung allegations ng tax authority ng Denmark na kulang-kulang daw yung transfer pricing documentation, sabi naman ng Supreme Court, hindi inadequate, no, yung transfer pricing documentation. So with that, I would like to say thank you po sa ating mga viewers, and let's call it a night.